In the previous video, we talked about what your body position should look like in freefall and how your instructor will be able to communicate with you. This video will be breaking down what are you going to do when the jump is supposed to be over. We're going to talk about your pull priorities, give an overview of what the pull sequence actually is, and then we're going to finish off by giving you the fundamentals that you need for parachute flight so that you will feel confident when descending under your parachute. So in these first few jumps, your pull altitude is going to be 5,500 feet. And you'll see here I've got a slide about what is the pull sequence, what will you be doing here. At 6,000 feet is what we call our lock-on altitude. This simply means that once you notice on your altimeter that you're getting close to 6,000 feet, you want to keep staring at your altimeter because 5,500 feet, where your pull sequence does start, is literally 2 to 3 seconds away. So once we get to our pull altitude of 5,500 feet, we want to begin by waving off. We're going to arch more, reach back for the pilot chute handle, the deployment handle, and we're going to throw out the pilot chute. Finally, we'll want to return to neutral. So let's break this down. Why do we wave off? Well, on the first few jumps, the wave off means nothing to your instructors, but it is a good idea to get into the habit of waving off before you deploy, because this is a signal to any skydiver that might be above you that a parachute is about to come out. We want to arch even more for two reasons, right? Arching gives us our stability, but it also turns out that the more you arch, the easier it is to get your hand onto your deployment handle. So better arch, easier time to reach your deployment handle, and more stability. So win-win all around. Finally, we're going to reach back and we want to make sure that we maintain symmetry. So what you're going to see is that the left arm is also going to be moving as well. Now, I don't really want you practicing this because you want to have an instructor watching you while you do this. Finally, once we've grabbed onto our deployment handle, we're going to throw it out into clean air and we return to our neutral body position as our parachute is deploying. So in each and every jump, we have these pull priorities and in the following order, meaning number one is going to be the most important thing that you can do. And this is on each and every jump that you ever make. So the most important priority is to, guess what? Pull. Because we can assume that if we are jumping out of an airplane and we do nothing, the end result is pretty much going to be death. No way to really sugarcoat it. So we cannot rely on our backup devices to help us out here. They probably will, but we can't rely on it. So on every single jump, we have to be sure that we are pulling. It's even better if we are pulling at the correct altitude. So we already mentioned that on this jump, your altitude is going to be 5,500 feet that you're pulling at. And our very lowest priority is going to be pulling at that correct altitude while being stable. So again, stability is your lowest priority. You should never sacrifice altitude to try to get stable again. Again, cannot state this strongly enough. The most important task that you have on every single jump is to pull. So what happens if you lose your instructor? So typically on your first AFF jumps, you're going to have 2 instructors with you. If you lose one instructor, you should just keep on going with that dive flow. We actually have some protocols in place in case the exit is a little bit weird. It's a little bit easier for one instructor to handle some of those scenarios. So that's common. What's not common is losing both of your instructors. So if you have neither instructor in physical contact with you, then you should pull. Okay, so free fall is over. And you've deployed your parachute, and now you've got a parachute that you need to be able to fly. So let's talk a little bit about that. First thing that we need to do before we can give any sort of input, we have to release our brakes. So hopefully you remember from the equipment equipment terminology, that parachutes are packed in what we call a half brake setting. When they first open, they're not in full flight. So to get them into full flight, we're going to put our hands into the toggles at the same time, and we're going to pull down on those toggles. This is going to allow us to release that excess that's been stowed, and once our hands go back up, now we will be in full flight. If you look at this image here, you can see that the steering toggles have one line connected to them, and if we were to follow that line all the way up to the top of the parachute, we would see that those steering lines actually, once it gets closer to the top, splits into 4 other lines, and on the very tail portion of the parachute, those lines attach. So what this means for us is that when our hands are all the way up, we're not pulling down on the tail of the parachute at all, and this is the full speed of the parachute. If we pull one of the toggles down, that's actually going to cause our parachute to turn. So what's going to happen is that when you pull down on one toggle, you're pulling down on that side, the very back of the parachute, and that's going to cause more drag while the other side is still able to fly. So it's actually going to cause you to turn in the direction of the toggle that you pull down. So if I pull my right toggle down, I'm going to turn right. If I pull my left toggle down, I'm going to turn left. And just like anything, before we turn, we should actually look first to make sure that we don't have anybody next to us, or even more importantly, anybody that might be just below us, because as we're turning, we're going to be losing altitude. The parachute is going to continue to turn while you hold this toggle down, and it turns out that the speed of the turn is directly proportional to how far you pull that toggle down. What does that mean? If I pull my toggle down to just about my ear or my shoulder level, I'm going to have a pretty slow turn. Whereas if I pull that toggle down even further, say all the way down to my hips, I'm going to have a very quick turn then. So depending on how far you pull your toggle down is how quickly your parachute is going to be turning. Finally, when we're coming in for landing, we need to do something that we call flaring. And that's when we pull both toggles down symmetrically. And this is going to be converting our forward speed into lift. Turns out if you time it just right, you can actually have a pretty gentle landing. It should be done in about a 2 to 3 second count, meaning that my hands are all the way up, and then when I start to flare, about 2 to 3 seconds later, I have finished my flare and my hand should be in the center of my body, just below my hip bones. And when the parachute opens, a good way to check to make sure it can do all of these things is what we call the steerability, or some people also call it the controllability check. So you're going to begin by releasing your brakes, and then you want to make sure that you can turn left as well as turn right. And you need to make sure that the parachute can flare. So you're going to do all of those things once you've visually checked that your parachute's okay. When you do go to flare, you're going to find that you will feel that lift that is being generated. Everything is going to get kind of quiet since your speed is much lower now. And then as you bring your hands back up into full flight, you're going to feel the parachute kind of diving a little bit into its full speed, as well as now there's going to be a lot more wind in your face again. All right, let's finish up this video by reviewing what we have learned in previous videos. First up, what does AAD stand for and what does it do? AAD stands for Automatic Activation Device. It is one of our backup systems, and it is the little computer that is sensing both your altitude as well as your speed. So based on its settings, if you are going too fast at too low of an altitude, it should automatically activate your reserve parachute. Again, we don't rely on it though. When should you check your altitude? You should check your altitude roughly every 5 seconds, whenever you've completed a maneuver or task, and whenever anything is going wrong. So most importantly, you need to know what your altitude is whenever you're having problems either in freefall or under your canopy. You find that you're on your back and you're spinning and it's 5,500 feet. What should you do? This is referencing our pull priorities, and we know that it is more important to pull at the correct altitude than to pull while being stable. So in this case, we want to pull. We're not going to sacrifice our altitude for stability. What is this and what does it do? So this is the second of our backup systems, and it is the RSL, or at least part of the RSL, and that stands for Reserve Static Line. So if it is connected, when you cut away a main parachute, it should pull your reserve pin. When do you receive equipment checks? There are 3 equipment checks. The first is done before you ever put the equipment on. The second happens before you get into the aircraft. And the third should happen just a few minutes before exiting the aircraft. Why do we need to release our brakes? Last question. So if you remember, our parachutes are set in a half brake setting. So this means that we are not in full flight and we cannot control our parachute until we have released our brakes. We do this by putting our hands into the toggles and smoothly pulling down on both of them at the same time to release that excess, and then we will be in full flight. So I hope you've been enjoying this series, and if you haven't already, please consider giving a like to this video and also consider subscribing to our channel.